Khiva, one of the oldest cities in Central Asia. In the Middle Ages, it was the capital of the powerful Khorezm state. According to legend, Zarathustra, the founder of fire worshipping, was born here. Khiva, like the whole of Khorezm, is considered one of the most ancient cultural regions of the East. The history of its creation goes back to ancient centuries and is covered with many legends.
Пророк Ной, когда был всемирный потоп, у него было 3 сына, и народ разделился на 3 части.
At the time of a worldwide flood, Prophet Noah had 3 sons, and the people were divided into 3 parts. The 3 sons left on opposite sides of the world. One of his sons, Sim, traveled for a long time through the Karakum desert. He stopped in one place where there was a very good reservoir with very tasty water. This pond is called Khivak. And when they stopped near this reservoir at night, he saw a prophetic dream. He dreamt about 300 bonfires that surrounded him. Next day, he called his wise men and told them about this dream. The wise men said that it must be a blessed land, and God wants us to stay here.
И рассказывал о своем сне. И мудрецы сказали, что это благородная земля, и Бог хочет, чтобы мы здесь остановились.
According to archaeologists, Khiva's age ranges from at least 2,500 to 2,700 years. Many unique architectural monuments of great cultural significance have survived in the city to this day. Most of them are concentrated in Ichan-Kala, an ancient fortress. Its name in translation means inner fortress. The territory of Ichan-Kala is 26 hectares. The city is surrounded by mud walls, more than 2,000 meters, to be more precise, 2,200 meters, 4 gates to 4 cardinal points. The architectural layout of Ichan-Kala, well preserved to this day, allows us to conclude that it was built on the principle that is characteristic of all the fortresses of the ancient East. The core of the city was the political and business center, and on the outskirts there were trading and residential quarters, the so-called rabads. The walls themselves were not simple either. They stood on the shaft. The width of the shaft could reach 30 meters. The width of the wall itself at the top 4-5 meters. At the base 7 meters. In height 7 to 8 meters. Sometimes even 9 meters. One of the oldest structures of Ichan-Kala is considered to be the Juma Mosque. The history of its creation and the form in which it has survived to our time, according to multiple written sources, goes back to the 10th, 11th century. However, scientific studies suggest that the age of the temple is much older than established.
В центре всегда было культовое место. In
the center, there has always been a cult place. These are the historical laws of any city. Khiva is no exception. Here, too, a cult center was located in the geographical center. At the moment, this is the Juma Mosque, but we adopted Islam in the 8th century, and the city is 2,500 years old. Perhaps an ancient temple was here, the temple of Zoroastrians. We cannot rule out this fact.
Возможно, на этом месте когда-то находился древний храм, храм Зороастрийцев. Это никто не может исключить.
The Juma Mosque in its layout and interior decoration is completely unlike the traditional forms of temples adopted in Islamic architecture. It has no portals, domes, galleries, and courtyard, and its arches are supported by wooden columns installed in different eras, starting from the 10th century.
Общее количество здесь колонн 213 колонн. 213 колонн, которые поддерживают вот этот весь.
The total number of columns is 213 columns. 213 columns that support this entire ensemble, and of them, 59 columns, as you can see, are new. Over time, they're changed due to the fact that they get old. So 59 columns out of 213 columns are new. Others are dated back to different centuries, starting from the 10th to the 19th century.
С 10 вплоть до 19 века.
The most common columns are made of elm, a material known for its reliability and durability. However, there are columns made from other types of wood. The greatest interest for scientists and art historians is the filigree carving that adorns all the columns of the Juma Mosque. We still have wood carving in Khiva. There is such a school. 3 to 5 schools, and each school has its own direction, its own style. Therefore, you will not be able to find identical patterns on any of the columns because each school has its own direction, its own styles. Therefore, they are different. Opposite to Juma Mosque, there is another sacred place for Muslims. This is the Mausoleum of Baklava Mahmoud, the national hero of Khorezm, a philosopher, a poet, and a fearless warrior. He died in 1326, with a magnificent tomb above his grave was erected many centuries later. The mausoleum was built in honor of the great wrestler, the hero Pahlavan Mahmoud, at the beginning of the 19th century by the Khiva Khan Muhammad Rahim Khan I, who bequeathed that after the construction of this mausoleum he should be buried closer to this man. He is revered as a saint like Awliya. Awliya is a shrine, a mediator between people and the Almighty. To this day, Pahlavan Mahmoud is considered the patron saint of Khiva, and his mausoleum, which became the tomb of many Khiva Khans, became a pilgrimage site for Muslims. One of the most famous monuments of ancient architecture in Ichan-Kala is called the Kalta-Minor minaret, which means short tower. In the written sources of Agahi, an Uzbek historian of that time, another name appears, Kok-Minor. It can be translated both as green and blue tower. That's how they plan to call the minaret at the end of construction. This tower is unfinished. You can pay attention to its foundation. After construction, it was supposed to become the highest tower in the entire Muslim world. At the moment, the height of this tower is 29 meters, but it should have been, in theory, narrowed upwards, approximately at a height of 89, 92, 90 meters. The construction of Kalta-Minor began in 1852 when Muhammad Amin Khan was the ruler of Khiva, but already 3 years later, the construction of the grandiose structure was stopped. Why? There are several versions. According to one legend, the master who erected the building fell in love with the ruler's wife and was severely punished by the Khan for this. However, scientists answering the question why the construction was not completed give the official version, which sounds more plausible.
Исторические факты говорят о том, что в 1853 году туркмены восстали.
Historical facts show that in 1853 the Turkmens revolted, and in 1855, when the construction work was already underway on this minaret, the Khiva ruler went on a campaign against the Turkmens to crash their uprising, and in this rebellion the ruler was killed. On this occasion, his project remained unfinished, and the one who took his place was Saidat Abdul Khan. He could no longer finish it because after the hostilities the treasury was empty. They had nothing to pay the workers. In addition to Kalta-Minor, another 15 minarets have been preserved on the territory of Khiva. Built in different eras, today they have become an integral part of the architectural landscape of the city reserve.
Постройка минаретов связана именно с торговлей. На территории пустыни караваны находили воду.
The construction of minarets is connected with trade because most of the territory of Central Asia is a desert and caravans found water. And in order to indicate the location of water, they built towers, tall towers near it. These towers were called minarets. The word minaret is taken from the Arabic word minor. It means a lighthouse. The primary function of the minaret is to indicate the path to the water. At the end of the 7th, the beginning of the 8th century, Arabs appeared here, and a new religion, Islam, was introduced. And the minarets acquired another function. From the minarets, they began to call for prayer. The Islam Khoja minaret built at the beginning of the last century has become the tallest building in Khiva, and to this day, only one structure surpassed it in scale throughout Central Asia, the Kutluk Timur minaret in Turkmenistan.
Минарет является, по мнению многих гостей,
The minaret, according to many guests of our city, is the most beautiful minaret in the East, the perfect combination of height, width, and masonry without a single flaw. So far, not a single brick has fallen from there. So far, not a single maiolica has cracked. Everything is in perfect condition, although more than a century passed.
не потрескалось. Все в идеальном состоянии, хотя уже прошло более века.
The minaret is part of the whole complex, which also includes the mosque and madrasa of Islam Khoja, a religious school. Here, teaching was conducted in several languages, and the minister planned to train specialists in a number of sciences necessary at the beginning of the 20th century.
Вот он сам лично спонсировал молодые хивинцы, чтобы они уехали за границу.
He himself personally sponsored young Khiva residents to go abroad and get an education there, returned here and taught everyone new skills in engineering, in architecture, art, and so on. For example, under his rule, there were men who studied in France and in Russia. They studied in St. Petersburg.
В России учились они в Петербурге. И даже был...
There was even a very famous person. His name was Khudaybirgen Divanov, the first Uzbek photographer, the founder of Uzbek cinema. This part of Ichan-Kala does not strike the eye like towering minarets, but still, its value does not become less. This is a place, a kind of city in the city, a fortified point from where, since the creation of the fortress, the rulers of Khiva have always ruled the state for centuries. Kunyak Ark means ancient citadel.
Он был построен самый первый в городе Хиве. Сейчас его некоторые фундаменты.
It was the first one to be built in Khiva. Now its foundation and some parts have been preserved since the 6th century. Some parts were later rebuilt several times because after each military action, they had to rebuild it. The palace consists of 3 parts. The first part is the reception part, where the ruler of Khiva was engaged in the reception of his population, his fellow citizens. The second part is the living room. Foreign ambassadors, foreign guests, when they arrived to see the Khiva ruler for several days, they stopped at this place. And the third part is called the harem. And the word harem comes from the Arabic word al-haram, meaning a forbidden place. This is a place of residence of the ruler's family, and the whole family lived in this part of the palace, as well as the ruler of Khiva himself.
Правителя Хиви, и вся семья жил в этом части дворца. И сам правитель Хиви.
According to one hypothesis, the emergence of both the Ichan-Kala fortress and the city of Khiva began precisely from here, from the residence of the rulers. At first, it was a small caravanserai, which then turned into a huge palace complex, built according to all the unique laws and traditions of local architecture.
У нас здесь на территории Khorezma и в те времена.
Here on the territory of Khorezm, traditional local events are built just like in those times in antiquity and to this day. This whole ensemble, this part, is called the Khiva Khorezm traditional summer event. The sun never falls here. There is a constant shadow and coolness. A cold cyclone is constantly present from the north. The upper part of the traditional event draws it in. It's reflected from the walls. The wind is down, again up, and the circulation begins. This is called a local traditional event, and events are supported by the columns that you now see. Many times rebuilt, Kunya Ark acquired its current appearance at the end of the 17th century. A century later, it was separated from Ichan-Kala by a high wall and also acquired all the necessary attributes of a political center. The Supreme Court, a reception hall, a harem, a mint, an office, and a mosque are located here. As you can see, the mosque is decorated with beautiful ceramics. This type of ceramic is called maiolica. There is also a mosaic which is made of very small pieces, and this differs from the size of the mosaic. It looks like tiles. Now you can see 85% of this beautiful ceramic. Before entering the residence of the rulers, there is a square. Military parades and ceremonies were held here. In addition, centuries-old tandoor has survived here. Special ovens in which bread is prepared. They're common for Uzbekistan and many countries of the East.
В Средней Азии, средние века были три государства. Это
In Central Asia, in the Middle Ages, there were three states: the Khiva Khanate, the Bukhara Emirism, and the Kokand Khanate.
То есть хлеб Хивинского ханства отличается от туркменского или бухарского.
And every region had its own kind of bread. That is, the bread of the Khiva Khanate was different from the Turkmen or Bukhara Emirism or Kokand Khanate. The most common is a thin Khorezm flat cake. We also call it a camping flat cake. Since caravans merchants arrived here, they stocked up with bread for the road. This bread stayed fresh for a week, and so it was very famous in Central Asia.
И он очень хорошо держался на походах. По этому поводу он был очень известен в Средней Азии.
The popularity of authentic Uzbek cuisine has long gone beyond the borders of Central Asia. We can safely say that many tourists go to the country not only for cultural but also for gastronomic impressions. Many of them want to learn centuries-old culinary secrets and popularize them in their homeland.
Now I take the naan, then you do a bit like this when you see when it's too small, and then you need to stamp, because the stamps, they have a roll, because if you don't stamp, then the bread, it became like, it's not flat, but it became like this, so you need to stamp. That's the reason why. And then she puts water on the top so you can attach it better to the tandoor. Why tandoor? That's a question I don't know why they have tandoor, and in Italy where I came from, the oven is different. I think it's about tradition. And then you can see there, she has water. And sometimes you have to put the water on the naan so it's not doing the bubbles. And do you want to know what's in naan bread? It's flour, basically milk, salt, water.
No water.
No water, you know water. And you put oil.
Eleanor came to Khiva from Sicily. Here she decided to expand her horizons in the field of Central Asian cuisine. But of course, the Asian monuments of Uzbekistan did not leave her indifferent.
Every time you take a step, it's similar like Rome. Every time you take a step, you think, wow, that's the Silk Road, I'm here. I'm walking where Marco Polo walked. I'm walking where caravan walked.
In the first half of the 19th century, the social, commercial, and political life of Khiva underwent changes. This happened during the reign of Alakul Khan. It was he who started the global reconstruction of the city and ordered the construction of a new palace, Tash Hauli, which can be translated as a stone courtyard.
Этот дворец был построен по приказу Хивинского хана.
This palace was built by the order of the Khiva Khan Alakul Khan. Alakul Khan ruled in Khiva in the middle of the 19th century, and the location of this building is considered to be the eastern part of the city. In the eastern part of the city, there were mainly shopping areas. There were bazaars, artisan shops, and caravanserais. The construction of the Tash Hauli palace lasted 6 years. By the standards of the powerful Khorezm in those days, it was a considerable period. But the task was not easy. The project involved the construction of a huge complex, which consists of 3 parts: Mihmon Khana, the throne room; Arzkhon Khana, the reception room of the ruler; and Haram Khana, the private chambers of the Khan.
Tash Hauli saroyi 1832-yilda Alakul Khan tomonidan qurdirilgan.
We are now located in Haram Khana. The word haram came into our language from Arabic. It means that outside men are forbidden here. Here, Alakul Khan lived with his wives and with 40 maidservants. Back then they were called kanis.
emas, begonalarning kirishi taqiqlanadi degan ma'noni bildiradi.
If you look at the terraces, they all have the same height and size. Only the first terrace is erected a little wider and larger than the other four, because this was the terrace of the Khan.
Shariat bo'yicha 4 ta xotinga ruxsat berilgan. Qachonki tenglikda, bir xillikda olib
When
borsa.
construction was going on, the master erected all the buildings on the basis of a uniform size. Then the Khan told the master that a man always stands at a higher level, in order to build his terrace 2 spans above the rest of the terraces.
Faqat bitta birinchi ayvonimiz qolgan 4 ta ayvonga nisbatan balandroq, kengroq qilib qurdirilgan.
Despite many years of research, to this day, scientists do not know the secret of making koshin, the tiles that decorated the harem courtyard. They will soon turn 200 years old, but to this day they have not lost any color or shine or any other of their qualities.
Mana bu ko'rib turgan koshilaringiz
Now you see the tiles, the so-called koshin. They were made by a craftsman named Abdullah Genie. His name is Abdullah and the genie is his nickname. The genie is a mythical creature, sometimes evil, but with great knowledge. Why was he called that? Because he did not teach anyone his craft. He did not have students. He did not reveal to anyone the secret of the composition of the tile, how to make it and what ingredients to use. This knowledge remains unsolved to this day and is not known by our contemporaries.
bir-biriga o'xshamaydi, farq qiladi.
After the Haram Khana, the private quarters of the ruler and his family, Mehmon Khana, was built, a reception yard. In this part of the palace, Alakuli Khan received visitors of the highest rank, leaders of neighboring states, ambassadors, as well as official delegations from other countries. In addition, artists, dancers, and musicians often performed here for the ruler and his guests. Tashhauli Palace was erected during the heyday of the culture, economy, and politics of Khorezm. During the reign of Alakuli Khan, his state was at the peak of power, and Ichan-Kala turned into one of the leading and most developed cities on the route of the Great Silk Road.
Его даже назвали за то, что он делал.
For the scale of what he did, he was even called the architect Khan, because he built and rebuilt a lot. And under his rule, the inner city expanded, and it was necessary to build an urban area for the population, because this population also had money. They were engaged in business, and they did not want to live somewhere in the village.
Потому что это население тоже имели деньги. Они бизнесом занимались, и они не хотели жить где-то в пустыне, где-то в деревне.
Interesting fact, but Ichan-Kala, despite the status of reserve city, still remains a residential area. Houses preserved in its territory today are a home to more than 3,000 people. Many of them work here as well. For example, Matyakup Matyakupov, doll master. It has already been 27-28 years since 1991 and since I started to make dolls. There are different types of dolls. They all have their own unique outfits. Here are the dresses. They are sewn from silk, like this. We sew them ourselves. Thank God we are doing well. Tourists come here. This is a touristic zone, and our dolls are bought for kindergartens. According to Matyakup, for the time that he has been engaged in his craft, dolls created with his hands are now in many countries of the world. The manufacturing process has been honed for years of daily practice, and now it takes just a few minutes to make one toy. We sell such dolls to our guests. They are all handmade. And they also have clothes for historical and national reasons. Hats too, like that. We create them based on folk tales. Our Khiva is an ancient historical city. It is known all over the world. Erected over several centuries and carefully preserved by the people of Uzbekistan, fortresses and palaces, mosques and madrasas, mausoleums, minarets, and caravanserais have turned Ichan-Kala into a unique city reserve that has no analogues in the world. In the UNESCO list of cultural monuments of world significance, Khiva occupies a special place as a major center of world civilization and one of the important centers on the Great Silk Road.